There's something funny that happens once you pass a certain age. Not funny, haha, but funny like, wait a minute, why was I ever doing that in the first place? For most of your life, you're taught to chase, to prove, to worry, to build, to explain. But then you hit 75, and the world starts to look a little different. You begin to see through things you used to take seriously. And the biggest realization? Some of the things that used to matter don't make a lick of sense anymore. Take my friend Linda, for example. She's 78 now. Still walks every morning, still does her crosswords in pen, and she told me something the other day over coffee that stuck with me. She said, I don't know why I wasted so many years trying to be liked by people who didn't even know who they were themselves. That's what we're talking about today. 9 things that used to seem important, but after 75, not anymore. Not even a little. Let's start with the one most people can feel in their bones. Worrying about what others think. Now, this one starts early. When you're a kid, you want your parents to be proud. When you're a teenager, you want to fit in. In your 30s, you want to impress your boss or your neighbors. And in your 50s or 60s, maybe you're still trying to look put together, like you've got everything under control. But somewhere around 75, a switch flips. And you start to see the truth. Most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to be judging yours. And if they are judging, so what? I remember my neighbor Bill, who's 81 now, came out one morning in his pajamas and slippers to get the paper. He waved at me and said, I used to be embarrassed to even be seen without makeup. Now I walk out with bed hair and mismatched socks, and I call it fashion. We laughed, but there's truth in that. At this age, you finally realize that other people's opinions don't pay your bills, don't fix your back pain, and don't know your journey. So why give them the power? There's so much peace in that freedom. You wear what's comfortable. You speak what's true. You stop apologizing for being a human being. That heavy coat of shame and shoulds just slips off your shoulders. And suddenly you breathe easier. You smile more. Because you're no longer performing for a crowd that was never watching to begin with. And here's the bonus. When you stop worrying about how others see you, you actually become more lovable, more authentic. People feel that you're real. And that's the kind of presence people want to be around, not the one trying to impress, but the one who's finally just being. Now let's talk about the second thing that stops making sense after 75. Chasing status or appearances. Look, we all did it. Whether it was climbing the career ladder, buying the right house, driving the car that turned heads, or decorating the living room so it looked like a magazine page, status was part of the game. Some people wore it as clothes, others as titles. Some people even chased youth itself like it was a prize they could win if they just used the right cream. But once you hit 75, you start asking, and for what? I once sat with a gentleman named Charles. He was a retired attorney, sharp as a tack at 84, and he said something I'll never forget. He leaned back in his chair, smiled, and said, I spent 40 years dressing in a suit and tie, trying to look powerful. But the happiest I've ever been is now in sweatpants, in my garden, with my hands in the dirt. That's wisdom talking. At this point in life, appearances feel like decorations on a cake you no longer crave. What matters is comfort, warmth, peace. You start reaching for the sweater that feels good, not the one that impresses the in-laws. You decorate your home with things that bring back memories, not match a color palette. You stop needing to look wealthy and start wanting to feel healthy. And let's not forget the emotional status games. You don't care about having the last word or proving a point. You pick your peace over proving your pride. Because you know now, life is too short to win arguments that don't feed your soul. For many seniors I've spoken with, this is a turning point. When the chase ends, joy begins. Because now you start looking at what really matters. Is your heart full? Is your spirit calm? Are you surrounded by people who love you for you, not for your achievements or your looks or your titles? Think of Maria, 76, who used to be a manager at a hotel chain. She once told me, I spent so many years trying to look important in meetings, heels, makeup, the works. Now, I sit in my backyard with no shoes on, my white hair tied up, and I watch the birds. And I've never felt more important. That's the kind of status money can't buy. You see, after 75, you begin to understand something the younger world often forgets. The best things in life aren't things. The soft blanket, the morning sun on your face, a good laugh, a grandchild's hug, the peace of being still, not the rush of being noticed. So if you're sitting there, wondering if it's okay to stop keeping up with the world, yes, it is. In fact, it might be the most honest thing you've ever done. We'll continue in the next part with something that touches many of us deeply, especially those who've spent a lifetime being the strong one. Pretending to be fine when you're not. Now this one, we're all guilty of it at some point. We've smiled through pain, said, "I'm okay," with tears in our eyes, and told people don't worry about me, even when we desperately needed someone to care. It's not that we were lying. It's just that we thought being strong meant being silent. But after 75, something changes. That emotional mask gets heavy. And you start asking yourself, why am I hiding how I really feel? At this age, you've earned the right to be honest about your grief, your fears, your loneliness, your joy, your hopes, all of it. No more sugarcoating. I remember Ruth, an 82-year-old widow in our community center. She lost her husband, Gary, a few years back. For a while, she tried to keep up appearances, wearing her red lipstick, cracking jokes, acting like she was okay. But one day, she just stopped. She came into the center with no makeup, sat down beside me and whispered, "I miss him every single day." And just like that, we had one of the most honest, beautiful conversations I've ever had. You see, honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And when you share your real self, others feel safe to do the same. That's the kind of connection that heals. When we stop pretending, we start connecting. We let others in. And in doing so, we give them permission to be real too. You don't need to carry your pain alone anymore. And you don't need to smile when your heart is breaking. It's okay to say, today is hard. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to sit in silence, knowing someone is simply there with you. That's strength. That's truth. And that's what life after 75 is for, letting the real you breathe. Now that takes us to something closely related and just as important, holding on to toxic people or guilt. Let's be honest, life's too short for poison, whether it's in the form of people or regrets. But many of us grew up with the belief that we had to maintain relationships out of duty, that we had to keep certain people in our lives because they were family, or because we owed them, or because letting go would seem cold. But at 75, you realize that peace is more precious than politeness. I remember Clarence, who's 79. He told me he stopped talking to his cousin 2 years ago, not because of a big fight, but because every conversation left him feeling drained and small. He said, "I used to feel guilty for cutting ties. Now I feel guilty I didn't do it sooner." There's no gold medal for enduring toxicity, no award for staying in pain. Whether it's a friend who always criticizes, a sibling who keeps bringing up old wounds, or even your own adult child who treats you with disrespect, you are allowed to say, "This is not good for me anymore." And it's not just about people. Sometimes the toxic thing we're holding onto is guilt. The mistakes we made, the words we didn't say, the time we lost. But guilt is like carrying a backpack of bricks into your 80s. And here's the truth. You've done your best with the knowledge you had. Everyone has regrets, but they don't have to define you. You can forgive without forgetting. You can let go without erasing. You can say, "I'm moving forward now, and I'm allowed to find peace." Think about it. How much space in your heart is being taken up by old wounds? And what could bloom in that space if you gave yourself permission to let go? This is not about bitterness. It's about boundaries. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about choosing your present. Because the time you have left, it's precious. And you deserve to spend it with people who lift you up, not tear you down. And now, the next part brings us to something we often overlook until our bodies force us to pay attention. Ignoring your body's messages. You know the old saying, listen to your body? Well, after 75, that's not a suggestion, it's survival advice. When we were younger, we could skip meals, stay up too late, pull a muscle, and shake it off the next day. But now, your body speaks a different language. It whispers before it screams. And the ones who live well past 80 are usually the ones who start listening early. I met Joanne at a community health talk last fall. She's 85, a retired school teacher, and sharp as ever. She said something that stuck with me. If I ignored the tightness in my chest today, I might not wake up tomorrow. That's the reality we live in now. We don't have the luxury of brushing things off anymore. And yet, so many older adults do just that. They skip the doctor. They brush off that nagging pain. They tell themselves, it's just aging. But aging doesn't mean suffering in silence. Aging means becoming wiser about what your body needs and giving it that care without delay. Your body is not your enemy. It's your ally. It's been with you through every chapter of your story, every heartbreak, every joy, every mile walked, every hug given. And now, it's asking for your attention, your kindness, your response. Don't wait until it breaks down. Rest when it asks. Stretch when it's stiff. Eat what nourishes, not just what's convenient. Hydrate. Move gently. Take your medications as prescribed. And if something doesn't feel right, speak up. You are not a burden. You are a human being taking care of the only vessel you'll ever get. And maybe most importantly, don't let fear stop you from being proactive. Getting something checked doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. You deserve health. You deserve comfort. And you deserve to wake up each day feeling as good as possible for as long as possible. Because after all, this isn't just about surviving. It's about living fully, honestly, with fewer masks, fewer regrets, and fewer aches you could have prevented. In the next part, let's dive into something that many of us, especially those raised to be helpful, polite, or self-sacrificing, struggle with even after 75. Saying yes to everything. You see, saying yes used to feel like second nature. We said yes because it was polite, because it made others happy, because deep down we thought being useful made us valuable. That saying yes made us a better mother, father, friend, neighbor. And sure, there's pride in being dependable. But after 75, you begin to see the cost of being constantly available. I remember Mrs. Esther Rosenberg. She's 80 now, lives down in Florida. We met through a senior wellness group last spring. Esther used to volunteer at her local synagogue 5 days a week. She cooked, cleaned, hosted events. She was everywhere. People loved her, but she was exhausted. When she finally had a minor stroke, the doctor told her, "You gotta slow down." And that's when she confessed something quietly to me. She said, "I kept saying yes because I didn't want to feel forgotten. But I was forgetting myself in the process." That hit me hard. We often don't realize how much energy we pour into saying yes when our bodies are saying no. And it's not just about physical tasks. Sometimes it's emotional labor. Listening to someone vent all the time. Carrying family tension on your shoulders. Being the peacemaker, the organizer, the backup babysitter. The one who always picks up the phone, even when you're too tired to talk. But here's the truth. After 75, your time becomes sacred. Your rest is sacred. Your peace is sacred. And you're allowed, no, you're entitled to protect it. I once asked a group of seniors in a support circle, when was the last time you said no to something you didn't want to do? A woman named Joyce, 77, raised her hand and said, "Just yesterday. My niece asked me to host her dog for a week while she traveled. I love her, but I'm not chasing a poodle around the house anymore." So I said, "Not this time, sweetheart." And we all clapped. Because that, right there, was a moment of liberation. Saying no doesn't make you mean. It makes you mature. It means you've learned that your well-being is just as important as everyone else's expectations. You've learned to check in with your body, your spirit, and ask, do I really want to do this? Or am I just afraid to disappoint someone? And if there's one thing you should never forget at this stage of life, it's this. You don't have to apologize for putting yourself first. Not now. Not anymore. Which leads us to something even more delicate, something too many of us have put off for far too long. Joy. Putting off joyful experiences. Let me ask you something. How many times have you caught yourself saying, maybe next year, or I'll do it after I get this sorted, or it's too late now? We put off little joys like they're luxuries we haven't earned yet, as if happiness needs permission, as if feeling delight is only allowed after we've ticked off 1,000 responsibilities. But when you're over 75 and you really take a moment to look at the road ahead, not with fear, but with clarity, you realize something important. If not now, when? A few years ago, I met Bernard and Helen, a married couple, both in their 80s. They had always talked about taking a trip to visit the lighthouses up the East Coast. Bernard loved history. Helen loved photography. But there was always something that got in the way: a wedding, a surgery, a grandchild's school recital. Then one day, Helen got sick. They never made the trip. Bernard told me years later, I'd give anything to be back in that moment when we said, maybe next year. Because now I realize next year never came. It's not about guilt, it's about urgency. A gentle urgency that says, don't wait for everything to be perfect. If there's something that stirs joy in your heart, no matter how small, don't brush it aside. Don't put it on a dusty shelf in the back of your mind. Wear that bright scarf. Dance to that old record in the living room. Call that friend you haven't spoken to in 20 years. Plant sunflowers in the backyard, even if they won't bloom until next season. Go to the beach even if your knees aren't what they used to be. Eat cake for breakfast if it makes you smile. And don't let anyone tell you what's silly or unnecessary. Because after 75, you've earned the right to fill your life with color, not just calendars. Even simple joys matter. In fact, those are the ones that linger. A warm bath with your favorite soap. A walk where you don't worry about how far you go. A slow breakfast with someone you love. You don't need a bucket list that involves planes and hotels. You just need a soul that's open to delight. And here's a little secret. The more you say yes to joy, the more alive you feel. And that feeling? That's what makes the aches bearable, the quiet moments sweeter, the heart more resilient. So if you've been telling yourself, I'll do it next week, maybe ask yourself instead, what if I did it today? What if you gave yourself that little happiness now? Because now is what you have. And now is enough. Next, there's one more kind of letting go that becomes really clear after 75. And that's physical clutter. Keeping the house too full. It's not just about stuff. It's about what the stuff represents. The papers, the extra chairs, the shelves of knickknacks, the boxes in the closet you haven't opened in years. It all tells a story. Maybe it once made sense to hold on. Maybe you thought, I might need this someday. Or, it reminds me of when the kids were little. But now, the clutter begins to feel like a weight. I visited Ms. Edna last winter. She's 87, sharp as ever, but her small living room was nearly swallowed by decades of furniture, books, keepsakes. She said, I don't even sit in half of these chairs. I keep them because they've always been there. I gently asked her, do they still bring you joy? She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly and said, only one does. The rocking chair. That weekend, with her niece's help, she donated most of the rest. And now, you walk into her space and it feels light, peaceful, like a deep breath. You see, the older you get, the more you crave simplicity, not just in your home, but in your heart. Clutter starts to echo your mental state. And many older adults will tell you, clearing the physical space helps clear the emotional one too. It's not about throwing away your life. It's about honoring it, choosing what truly matters now. Not what mattered 30 years ago, not what your grown children might want, but what you need for peace, comfort, and freedom. And here's something else. Decluttering isn't just about preparing for death, as some people fear. It's about making the most of the time you still have. About living in a space that supports rest, movement, clarity. It's about not tripping over old furniture in the dark. not feeling overwhelmed every time you open a cabinet. It's about taking control of your environment, because that's one thing you can still control. What would it feel like to wake up and look around a room that only holds things that bring comfort, joy, and usefulness? What if your home could reflect the calm you've worked your whole life to earn? You deserve that calm. You deserve to let go, not out of sadness, but out of wisdom. And now, we arrive at the final shift that happens after 75. The one that's perhaps the most powerful of all. Staying silent about what truly matters. Many of us grew up believing silence was strength. That you don't talk about feelings. That you avoid conflict. That you smile politely at things that bother you. And for years, maybe that worked. Maybe it kept the peace, or helped the kids, or avoided arguments during holiday dinners. But now, something inside says, enough. You start to feel it more clearly after 75. The urge to speak up, not to cause drama, but to finally be honest. To say what's on your heart before time runs out. I think of Harold, who's 80 now. For most of his life, he was what people called a quiet man. Never raised his voice, rarely shared what he felt. But one afternoon, sitting at a family barbecue, he told his daughter out of the blue, "I'm proud of you. I know I never said it much, but I see how hard you work. And I just wanted you to hear it from me before I go." She cried. He cried. And it opened up a new kind of relationship between them, one built on truth. That's the gift of age, perspective. And at some point, it no longer makes sense to keep the most important words locked inside. Maybe it's time to forgive someone who hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Maybe it's time to say, "I love you," to someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's time to tell your story, your real story, so the next generation understands who you really are. You don't have to yell. You don't have to preach. But your truth deserves air. And your heart deserves to be heard. You've lived too long, seen too much, and grown too wise to sit in silence now. So speak. Speak with love, with honesty, with courage. Let the people in your life know who you are, not just what you did, but what you believe. Let your words be your legacy. Because when all is said and done, that's what remains. Not the house, not the car, not the titles, but the feeling you gave people, the peace you made, the truths you finally shared. Now let's bring it all home. After 75, life doesn't end, but it transforms. You begin to see the world through clearer eyes, and your heart starts to lead the way instead of your ego. And through that lens, 9 things, once considered normal, start to fall away. You stop worrying about what others think. You stop chasing status. You stop pretending to be fine. You stop clinging to toxic guilt or relationships. You stop ignoring your body's needs. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop delaying joy. You stop holding on to too much. And finally, you stop staying silent about the things that really matter. What you gain in return is something no money can buy. Inner peace, clarity, emotional freedom. So, dear listener, let me leave you with this. You are not past your prime. You are in a sacred season, a time of harvest, of truth, of realignment. You don't have to follow the old rules anymore. In fact, the beauty of this stage is that you get to decide what makes sense and what no longer deserves space in your life. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to live not with hesitation, but with heart. If you felt connected to any of these 9 shifts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What have you let go of? What are you still holding on to? What wisdom do you wish you'd known sooner? This community is richer when we speak from experience, not perfection. And if this message spoke to you, share it with someone you love. A friend, a sibling, a neighbor. Because sometimes the right words at the right time can change everything. Until next time, take care of your peace. You've earned it.